right, if you're watching the video, same as usual. When you're done with the video, send me a list of the words, the attendance words, with screenshots every time I say the attendance words, and that's how you will claim your points for this video. It is, well, the first word for you, for anybody watching the video, is going to be blue, like the color blue. But anyway, if you're watching the video, it's about 7:34 right now, so you can skip ahead about 25 minutes, and that's when the lecture will start. How was your weekend?
It was interesting. Was that you?
Oh, interesting. Huh? It was okay. Not interesting.
Huh?
Mine was not interesting, which I'll take.
There was someone was gonna ask you about the on the notes, but I didn't want to barrage you because there's a lot to looking up to you.
What is it?
Hold on. Oh shit, I lost it.
Maybe you'll think of it.
All later.
Yeah.
Today. I know it was something about the NADT or NADH or.
One thing I can tell you about that is if it's any questions that have to do with NADPH or NADH or FADH2, any of that, you should just think of it as just the thing carrying around electrons. So that's the thing that moves high energy electrons from one reaction to another.
Okay. You a car guy? You like cars?
Not really. I don't know. Not like my friends are. They're into them, and they would spend money to get a good one and spend money to fix theirs up. And I'm just not into it. I don't know why. How about you?
Love cars. Love Corvettes.
I mean, I like the way they look. I don't know anything about them. My aunt used to have one.
Yeah. My dad has one, but he doesn't ever get it out or do anything with it. I'm like, you just want either?
Right?
Have some fun with that shit.
Yeah.
That's dope. You have a favorite sports car?
No, when I was younger, I did. I don't know why. When I was a kid, I was like the Mitsubishi 3000 GT. But now, I don't know. I mean, maybe Corvette might be it, I guess, if I had to choose. Especially the way they look, like the older ones, like the really old ones, the Stingrays.
The C4s?
I guess. I don't know. Yeah, but those I like, and really like the way the new ones look. But again, I don't know anything about them. Like, people who know, like, oh yeah, they're great, except this one year. Yeah, no one needs that stuff.
Yeah. I got you.
How about you?
Corvettes?
Yeah, I mean, is that your favorite sports car?
Yes, I love C7s. The C7s are like one below the new ones right now.
Okay.
They can put out a lot of horsepower. So that's all I know. And that's all I'm looking at right now.
Gotcha. Morning.
Morning.
Excuse me. Morning.
Morning.
Morning. Morning. Anybody do anything fun this weekend? Morning. All right, let's see here. Gunther's here. One of the Hills is here. Perez is here. Slaughter, right? Yep, Slaughter's here. Stover is here. Tompkins is here. That's everybody for now, but we still have 3 minutes. Morning.
I'm ready.
Good morning. Morning. I've got about 1 minute left. So let's see, Brumville is not here yet. Champion is not here yet. Grovey is not here yet. Gross is not here yet. Gunther is here. Randall Hill is here. The other Hill is not. Jackson is here, if I remember correctly. I see, yep, Jackson is here. Keys is not here yet. Perez is here. Sigmund came in, right? Is that you back there? Yeah, Sigmund is here. Slaughter is here. Smith is here. Stover is here. Tompkins is here. The Nest is not here yet. Watson is not, wait, Watson's here, right? No, Watson's not here yet. Young is not here yet. Zweiback is not here yet. Lawrence is here. Carter is not here yet. So we have Keys, right? Keys is now here. And Watson, right? Is Watson here? No, Young, sorry. I'm dark. It's 8 o'clock. Did I miss anybody? All right. Let's wait till it's 8:01. No one's late until 8:01. Then we'll get started. So, have any questions between now and then? All right. So I guess the first announcement, even though it's not 8:01 yet, since I say it every day, I don't feel bad starting this before somebody else gets here because I say it every day. Attendance is mandatory and graded, right? So if you're watching the video, you know what to do. I've already told you. And if you're here in person, again, you don't have to turn these in, but you can as long as you turn them in before 9 a.m. I know I say that every day, but people still send it after 9 a.m. Yeah, send it before 9 a.m. and you can get your extra credit for sending those in. And the first word for today will be black, like the color black. It's the first word for attendance. And it is 8:01, so we'll close the door and get started. And not to jump around a little bit, but midterms are coming on October 12th, I think it is. So that would mean on October 13th, I'm turning in grades. So if you have a poor attendance grade, now's the time maybe to start thinking about that, right? Because you can go back and watch the videos, assuming that it's recorded, of the days you missed, and write down the words, take the screenshots, and get your points for it. So keep that in mind, because again, midterms are coming up. I have to turn in grades, and attendance is what, 1/10? It's a full letter grade, right? So it could really help you or hurt you, depending on what the situation is. So any questions about attendance? Yeah, one last thing, sorry. Speaking of that, if you don't know the days you've missed, email me, and I can tell you the days you've missed, and then give you the link that has all the videos, and you can just go to and watch those, the appropriate videos. So anyway, any questions about attendance? All right, nice and easy. I'm not having office hours today. I have to deal with something with my vehicle, so I won't be in my office. You might be able to reach me, so if you call my office cell or my office phone, as usual, it's forwarded to my cell phone. So I'll be there if you need me. And on a related note, I'm still catching up with emails and grading. I didn't do any work this weekend. I actually took the weekend off again, so I've got a lot to catch up on. So if you need me in a hurry, don't email me, because it'll be a while before I get to it, because I always take care of it in the order in which it was received. So there's a lot of stuff going back from Friday. So again, if you need me, call me. Or if you don't need me in a hurry, you could email me. It'll just be a while before I get there. So any questions about that? All right, this week's lab. As usual, we're going to meet here 9 a.m. Make sure you have closed-toed shoes and pants on. The pre-lab is now past due, as usual, because pre-labs are always due on Friday. Also, as a reminder, last week's grade was based on attendance, right? We didn't do anything. All you had to do was be here on time. So if you missed that, or if you didn't do the pre-lab and you're missing points, you can do the online version of the lab to make up for those lost points. I mean, anybody can do the online version of the lab for extra credit, but I would recommend that for people who were not here yesterday or last week, and or who didn't do the pre-lab. Another thing too, if you weren't here last week, even though I said this last week, I'm reminding you again, there's a video I recorded a lecture, so you need to watch that lecture just like you normally would. Send in the screenshots and the emails that prove that you watched the lecture, and you can make up for your points if you do the online lab too, right? So you can get half credit for watching the video and sending in the words, because you need to know, otherwise you have no idea what's happening on Wednesday. So watch that video. Any questions about that? All right, just to remind you again, I know I say this every time, but even though I say it every time, still some people come up surprised that they didn't know. Exam 1, you can still retake it, right? You can retake exam 1. You have to let me know when you're done so I can go in and average your grade. You can retake it as many times as you want. It's not timed, it's open book. But if for some weird reason you still get a lower grade, then just don't tell me. I won't adjust your grade, right? We'll just keep your original higher grade. So you got nothing to lose. So please, I would recommend retaking the exam 1. Speaking of exams, exam 2 will be due on Sunday, October 12th. That's the schedule, right? That would be 8 weeks into the semester. So midterms, yeah. But this stuff that you're going to be tested on is the stuff hopefully that we'll finish today. So chapters 3, 4, and 5, right? So basically cells and energy, right? We're learning about energy. That's what the exam's going to be on. So if it were up to me, well, it kind of is up to me. I don't know. Part of me would say, we should have this exam done by this Sunday, because we're going to be done with this stuff. So it would make sense for you guys to be, get tested on it shortly after we're done with it. So on that note, you can take it as early as you want. I think starting tomorrow it will be open. So if you're the kind of person who likes to take an exam shortly after you learn the material, then that's what you could do, right? Otherwise, again, you have until Sunday, October 12th, to take the second exam. And again, hopefully today will be the last day of this stuff that we're going to be tested on. That's a couple weeks. You've got a lot of time. And again, you don't have to do it now, but You don't have to wait either. You can do it whatever you want. But exam 2 is just going to be like the last one. It's going to be about 50 questions, multiple choice. You're going to have 50 minutes to take it. Unlike last time, some of you I'm sure noticed there was a little glitch that helped you out with the last one. And I won't even get into that. But for those of you who did notice that glitch and took advantage of it, I don't blame you. I just want to let you know I figured out that glitch. That glitch will not happen again for exam 2. So when you take an exam 2, please don't, be banking on that, thinking that that glitch will still be there. So anyway, again, as usual, if you want more time to take the exam, let me know. If we can meet all 9 and I can see that you're taking a closed book exam, I'll get rid of the time limit. I don't care how long it takes you to take the test, as long as I know you're not looking up the answers. So that's it. Any questions? All right, so since people came in late, I'll remind you, you're going to need to send the attendance words. You're going to have to send me an email just to let me know that you were here and not absent. So, any questions about anything? All right, let's jump into it. Let's do really quick, again, the big picture before we start getting back into the nitty gritty. Like I just said, this whole exam is basically about energy, right? Because we know that energy can not be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred from one form to another. We know that cells need energy to survive, and we have to transform it from one form to another. You know specifically that cells need ATP to live, right? That's our currency, energy currency. And you know from the last chapter that we get ATP by breaking down glucose in the presence of oxygen in during good grief, I can't think right now. And cellular respiration, right? So we're breaking down glucose to make ATP. Now, in this chapter, you're learning how we make that glucose that we break down to make ATP. So that's what photosynthesis is, right? And we're learning about, all right, big picture, right? There's 2 stages. There's the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. And again, most of the exam, for this portion of it anyway, is going to say, which stage does this happen? And which stage does that happen? And which stage is this produced? And which stage is that used, right? So keep that in mind as we go through this. And what we left off, we were talking about light reactions, right? We did the overview where we talked about everything. Then we started going back into more detail and really looking at it closer. We were talking about light reactions, and we talked about 2 different photosystems. And we ended up talking about this one. This is the last one we talked about. So in the first photosystem, again, we've got the water that's giving away the electrons. Those electrons get excited from photons from the light. Eventually, that excited electron gets captured by something called the primary electron acceptor. And there's a few test questions on here. For example, which of the 2 stages uses water? That would be light reactions. Which of the 2 stages produces oxygen? Light reaction. Which of the 2 stages, and someone's going to get this wrong, and it's going to make me really sad because this one should be really easy. Which of the 2 stages uses light? Light reactions or Calvin cycle? And this is light reactions. Which of the 2 stages produces high energy electrons as opposed to using them? That would be light reactions. So that's where we're at so far. Any questions from where we left off? Oh yeah, and then the other test question. This is one that people do miss a lot too because it is a little bit tricky. So there's going to be a question that says something along the line. This is going to be fill in the blank. There'll be 3 blanks, and it'll be something along the lines of, in photosynthesis, electrons are donated by blank, which produces a molecule of blank, and then those electrons are eventually incorporated into a molecule of blank. And the last one, because it's not on the screen, is glucose. So that's where all these electrons are going. That's where they come from. So any questions? All right. So again, if you're looking at the big picture and just the basics before you start learning all this other stuff, to remind you, light reactions are the whole thing, right? We're trying to make glucose. And that's broken down into 2 stages. Light reactions, which is, we can see part of it right here, and the Calvin cycle. So if you remember, the Calvin cycle is the thing that's actually going to make the glucose, right? That's the actual, what we're after. The light reactions, in a sense, are basically like the powerhouse, right? So we need energy to make the glucose. That's what happens, when we make the glucose in the Calvin cycle. So the whole purpose of light reactions is to produce that energy. And remember, there's 2 forms of energy that we're after. One of them is high energy electrons. So you see it now where the high energy electrons come from, right? They come from the water, and then they get excited by the photons, right? The light. That's where we get high energy electrons. The other form of energy that we're after is ATP, right? We need energy to squish those molecules together, right? To squish that carbon together. And I haven't told you yet where that ATP comes from, but that's what we're going to talk about with the next photosystem, the second photosystem. It's very similar. So again, at the end of the first photosystem, we have that excited electron, right? But here, we're going to excite it again. right? So we're gonna use photons, we're gonna get it even more excited, we're gonna get it even more energized. And then that high energy electron is going to go to an electron transport chain, just like the one you learned about in respiration. As far as you're concerned, for this 100 level class, it is exactly the same, right? So everything you learned about how the electrons go from protein to protein inside of the mitochondria, and it's pumping hydrogen ions against the concentration gradient so then they can diffuse back down, and that produces ATP. It's the same thing here, except of course this is happening in the chloroplast, and not the mitochondria, but other than that, as far as we're concerned, it's the exact same thing. So I'll show you a slide, or a picture of it. It'll make more sense. So this is the part you already saw, right? This is the primary, this is the first reaction that we already talked about. Again, water is providing those electrons. The light excites the electrons. Then something captures that excited electron. It sends it to the electron transport chain, and even though you can't see it on here, I think it's on the, well, maybe another slide. We're pumping hydrogen ions against the concentration gradient so they can diffuse back down and make ATP, right? And then, of course, like I said, just like in respiration, when they go from proton to proton, they're releasing their energy. That's how we're pumping the hydrogen ions against the concentration gradient. So then they get excited again, right? So since they're not as energetic as they were, photons, again, the light energizes them again. They get captured again, but this time when they're captured, they're taken away by that NADPH, and they're incorporated into a molecule of glucose. That's pretty, pretty complicated, but you don't need to know all those details, right? I'm not going to necessarily, you don't need to know that, the light excites it and then it goes down the transport chain and gets excited again. You don't need to know the order of that. The big thing here that you need to know is that we're producing ATP, we're producing high energy electrons, we're using water, we're producing oxygen. That's the big thing. So even though I've given you all those details, it seems like it's a lot to remember, but for the exam, I'm probably not going to test you much on the process. I just want you to know that we used water, we produced oxygen, we used light, we used chlorophyll, we excited electrons, and we produced ATP and high energy electrons. And again, even for the exam, I'm not sure if I'm going to use the term high energy electrons or if I'm going to use the term NADPH. As far as we're concerned, it's the same thing. That NADPH is simply the molecule that's carrying the high energy electrons. Or like I said, when I first mentioned it in respiration, when I was talking about NADH, which is, as far as we're concerned, the same thing. I said it's like the bucket that carries the electrons, so that would make sense with this picture. By the way, these pictures are not in your textbook, so if the pictures in your textbook don't make sense to you, then download the PowerPoint and look at these pictures when you're studying. So yeah, I like this picture from the old textbook. It's a great way to show what happens, right? So you have this photon exciting the electron, right? It's putting its energy in, it gets captured, and then it gets taken to the electron transport chain where it literally turns the ATP synthase, and that's what makes ATP. But in the process of doing that, it's losing some of its energy. So we have another photon excited again, where it gets captured again, and then, NADPH takes it off to incorporate it into a molecule of glucose. So any questions? All right, the next word for attendance is purple. Remember, if you came in late, you're going to need to send me those words. Otherwise, it's just half credit. But if you came in late and you weren't that late, but you got all the words, then, you're going to have more of the points. Anyway, purple is the next word for attendance. There's no questions. Let's talk about this. ATP, as I already mentioned in the other slide, the ATP production is similar to what happens in respiration. And again, as far as we're concerned at this level of biology, it's basically the same exact thing. It just happens in the not the mitochondria, but the chloroplast. And again, just like in respiration, the electron transport chain is pumping hydrogen ions across the membrane against their concentration gradient. And then nature just takes its course. They diffuse back down. They do that through the enzyme called ATP synthase. The process of doing that produces ATP, just like it does in respiration. There are some differences though. So this is worth noting. And because you need to know this, right? In respiration, where are those high energy electrons coming from? They're coming from food. Specifically for the exam anyway, I should change that. Yes, it is food, but remember I just said for the exam to keep things simple, we're just going to focus on glucose, right? So yes, the high energy electrons are coming from glucose when it's in respiration, but that can't be the case in photosynthesis because the whole purpose of photosynthesis is to make glucose, right? So in photosynthesis, it's the water that's providing the electrons, not the glucose. And again, there will be 2 test questions where you would basically have to fill in the blank for that. So for respiration, again, it'll be something along the lines of high energy electrons come from blank, which is glucose. They are eventually accepted by a molecule of blank, which is oxygen, which produces a molecule of blank, which is water. And it's the opposite for photosynthesis, right? High energy electrons come from water, which produces a molecule of oxygen, and those high energy electrons are eventually incorporated into a molecule of glucose. So any questions about this slide? All right, here's a picture of everything I just said. And again, this is not in your textbook, so if you don't like the pictures from your textbook, download the PowerPoint and study this. But it's pretty simple here, right? So we've got the light hitting the photosystem, energizing those electrons, which, by the way, came from water and produced a molecule of oxygen. Those excited electrons go to the electron transport chain where we're pumping hydrogen ions against their concentration gradient, so then they can diffuse back down through ATP synthase and produce that molecule of ATP. In the process, too, we're also re-exciting those electrons because they lost some of their energy pumping the hydrogen ions against their concentration gradient. So we re-excite them in the second photosystem, and then they're captured by the NADPH. Now we have what we need to make the glucose, right? We have our high energy electrons, we have our ATP. Both of those things go into the Calvin cycle. So there you go. Any questions about that? All right, and just as a reminder, the next slide is basically, not basically, it is a picture of respiration. So this should look really familiar, right? Here's what happens in photosynthesis. Here's what happens in respiration, right? It's basically the same thing in a sense. High energy electrons going from protein to protein, pumping hydrogen ions against their concentration gradient. They diffuse back down and produce ATP. So again, very similar. So that's it for light reactions. Does anybody have any questions about light reactions? All right, it's a good time for me to remind you too. I said this last week, I'll say it again. This might be the last time we talk about photosynthesis, so this might be the last time I remind you. But in this exam, again, most of the questions are going to be, in which stage does this happen? Which stage does that happen? In which stage is this used? In which stage is this produced? Now think about it. For photosynthesis, there's only 2 real options: light reactions or Calvin cycle, or 3, light reactions, Calvin cycle, or both. But it's a multiple choice question, or it's a multiple choice exam, so there's going to be other choices. So I'm telling you now, again, when you take answering questions about photosynthesis, these are the only 2 correct answers. And as long as you guess light reactions or Calvin cycle, even if you're wrong, you're going to get partial credit. If you guess, I don't know, glycolysis, for example, that might be an option. If you guess glycolysis, you're getting 0 credit because glycolysis is respiration, it has nothing to do with photosynthesis. So I'm telling you now, once again, anytime you get a question about photosynthesis, the only correct answer is going to be light reactions or Calvin cycle, and you will get partial credit as long as you guess one of those 2 things. If I have any questions about that? All right, nice and easy. So then again, before we look into go into the details of the Calvin cycle, I just want to remind you the big picture here, right? Is we're just trying to make glucose. That's what photosynthesis is all about, trying to make glucose. And like I said, when we're looking at the big picture, light reactions is all about providing the energy needed to make the glucose. And the Calvin cycle is just what makes the glucose. So let's talk about it. It functions as the sugar factory. That's maybe even a better way of putting it. So I mentioned this before, I'll mention it again. Technically, we're not directly even making glucose. Technically, we make another molecule that I'll explain here a little bit later. And then that molecule is turned into glucose. But to keep things easy for this 100 level course, we just keep saying they make glucose, right? We're making glucose. For extra credit too, you can look into that. What are the actual products of photosynthesis, right? I'm giving you the easy version, but if you want to look into it, what are the actual products? Anyway, the Calvin cycle, because it's a cycle, it does regenerate the starting material with each turn. That'll make sense when I show you a picture of it, but I'm not going to ask you any questions about that. Each turn, just like any chemical cycle would, has inputs and outputs. And again, that's going to make more sense when I show you the picture. And again, I'm not going to ask you any questions about that. But I'm not going to ask you the questions about the inputs and outputs in that way. But I will ask you this, and I've already told you this. Which of the 2 stages uses carbon dioxide? Calvin cycle. Which of the 2 stages uses ATP? Calvin cycle. Now, that'll be tricky, because remember, we just talked about producing ATP, so don't let that trick you when you take the exam. Which of the two stages produces ATP? That's the Light reactions. Which of the two stages uses ATP? That's the Calvin cycle, right? Which of the two stages uses high energy electrons, or NADPH? That would be the Calvin cycle, right? Which of the two stages produces those high energy electrons? That would be the Light reactions, right? So as long, again, if you can just remember that light is a form of energy, hopefully that'll help you remember that the whole purpose of light reaction is just to provide energy in the form of ATP and high energy electrons. If you can remember that, you're golden. Because then you'll have all those correct answers, like, all right, we're producing ATP, we're producing high energy electrons. And then naturally, if those are the ones that are producing it, then obviously the Calvin cycle is the one using those high energy electrons and those the ATP. So there you go. Anyway, that's the inputs. Outputs. Obviously, what we're after is glucose. And again, as far as we're concerned, for the exam, for this 100 level course, we're just going to keep it at glucose. But just so you know, it's actually something called G3P, right? G3P. And that G3P is then used to produce glucose. But then, like I was saying, it does produce other stuff. And if you want to look into that for extra credit, you can. What are the other things the G3P is used to create? Yeah. So anyway, that's it for now. I'm going to show you a picture of the Calvin cycle. But there's a lot of test questions on that slide. So are there any questions about that slide? Okay. Here we go. Here's what I'm talking about. We have the carbon dioxide from the air. We have this. All right, here's another thing you don't need to know. You don't need to know the name of that acceptor molecule. But I'm going to see if anybody catches this. See if anybody notices. And I give extra credit to anybody who does catch it. You're welcome. So we got this molecule here, right? You don't even need to know its name. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It happens to have 5 carbons. That's important if you're really studying this at a higher level of biology, but for you guys, it doesn't matter. The fact that it has 2 phosphate groups attached to it at a higher level of biology would be important, but for you guys, it's not. But here's something interesting. And again, this is pictures from the old textbook. So I want to see if anybody notices what's interesting about this. Here we have this 5 carbon molecule, right? And we're adding a carbon to it, right? This is what we start with. We add a carbon to it, and now we have this thing right here, this 3 carbon molecule. Anybody see anything weird about that for extra credit? Don't overthink it, because I remember the first time I saw that, and I was like, what? Hoping that jumps out to somebody. All right, do we have any math majors? Okay, good, no math majors. So I'm going to ask you a math question, see if anybody gets it. It's going to be complicated. 5 plus 1 equals... Right, 6, not 3, right? What this picture fails to show you is that there's actually another step. We're adding this carbon. We have a 6 carbon molecule at some point that they don't show. That's then breaking into 2, leaving us with this 3 carbon molecule. So good job. There you go. Also notice too that the textbook, at least the old one, I don't even know if the new one does, it doesn't even name this 3 carbon molecule. So as you can imagine, I'm obviously not going to ask you the name of it. But for extra credit, you can look it up. What is the name of that 3 carbon molecule? Also, what the hell happened between here and here that I didn't tell you about, right? How do we go from 5 carbons to 6 carbons and back down to 3? And again, like everything else we've talked about when we talk about respiration and photosynthesis, like I mentioned a million times, every single one of these reactions is happening because of a very specific enzyme that I don't teach you. And for extra credit, you can look it up, right? What enzyme is responsible for this reaction or reactions, since they're not showing all of them. Likewise, then we have that 3 carbon molecule. Now we get our ATP and our high energy electrons involved. And then that's how we convert this 3 carbon molecule that I haven't named to G3P. And remember, G3P is what we're after. And again, remember, even though it's doing a horrible job of showing this, technically there's 2 of these molecules, right? And technically, well, they do show it here. There's 2 of these molecules. So now one of those molecules leaves the cycle and gets used to produce glucose and other things. The other one stays in the cycle, and it also goes through some changes with some ATP, and that produces, we then go back to our original acceptor molecule, and then the whole cycle continues. Pretty complicated. But again, I'm not going to ask you questions about what do we start with? I'm not going to ask you about the carbon being added to the original molecule and when the ATP and the high energy electrons used. I'm not going to ask you all those details. For the exam, all the test questions are going to be, which of the 2 stages uses carbon dioxide? Calvin cycle. Which of the 2 stages uses ATP? Calvin cycle. Which of the 2 stages uses high energy electrons? Calvin cycle. which of the two stages produces glucose? Calvin cycle. So even though there's a lot going on in that picture, you don't need to know all those details. Also, again, if you were to look that up, like in a real cell biology textbook, that like a senior level biology major would pick, this is so easy. It's like the easier version. And you can look it up if you want for extra credit. If you really want to write about the true process that has all the intermittent steps and the enzymes responsible for it, then I'll give you extra credit for that. Anyway, any questions about that picture? Okay, the next word for attendance is yellow. So if you're watching the video and you take a screenshot, you see a picture where I have circled that yellow ATP, because yellow was the next word for attendance. All right, so again, big picture here. This is everything we've talked about. And again, these pictures are not from your textbook. This is from the old textbook. The whole thing is happening in the chloroplast, which is what that big circular blob thing is supposed to be. Light is going to hit the chlorophyll and the light reactions, exciting the electrons that came from water, which produces oxygen, right? Those high energy electrons are used to produce ATP. They're also captured in the form of NADPH. That ATP and NADPH goes into the Calvin cycle, where we use that energy to squish a bunch of carbon together to make glucose. Nice and easy. At least I think so. I hope so. I don't want it to be hard. I want it to be easy. And some other reminders, and I've said this before, but again, any question on this exam that says anything about carbon dioxide, whether it's about using it or producing it, right? Because we use it in photosynthesis, we produce it in respiration. Either way, if there's a question about carbon dioxide, then the answer is going to be some kind of cycle, whether it be the Calvin cycle or the citric acid cycle. All those C's is supposed to remind you of carbon dioxide, right? Cycles and carbon dioxide, that's what she's thinking of. So I'll remind you again, too, in your textbook, I think they call the citric acid cycle from respiration, I think they call it the Krebs cycle with a K, because that is another name for it. But I don't call it that because I want to give you that hint, and I want you to see a C and think, oh yeah, C. So that's a cycle. C for cycle, C for carbon. So hopefully that'll help you with the exam. Any questions about this slide? All right, today's gonna be an early day, but really quickly, let's do a review. So again, just test questions that I can come up with that are on this slide. Which of the two stages uses light? Light reactions. Which of the two stages uses water? Light reactions. Which of the two stages produces oxygen? Light reaction. Which of the two stages produces ATP? Light reactions. Which of the two stages uses ATP? Calvin cycle. Which of the two stages produces high energy electrons? Light reactions. Which of the two stages uses high energy electrons? Calvin cycle. Which of the two stages uses carbon dioxide? Carbon with a C, Calvin cycle. And which of the two stages produces sugar, glucose? Calvin cycle. A lot of test questions right there. And, that's basically what the exam is going to be when it comes to photosynthesis. Again, other than that other one, that fill in the blank one, which is, electrons. In photosynthesis, electrons come from water, which produces a molecule of oxygen. And those electrons are eventually incorporated into a molecule of glucose. Nice and easy. And again, all the pictures. How are we making the ATP? Same way we did in respiration, right? We've got these high energy electrons that go to the electron transport chain that were used to pump hydrogen ions against the concentration gradient. Then they diffuse back down, and that's where we make the ATP, right? This is a great picture to study. So remember I showed you that other Calvin cycle that had all the details? If you're studying, this is the best one, I think, because this is all you need to know as far as the exam is concerned, right? We're using ATP and high energy electrons. We're using carbon dioxide, and we're producing glucose. Pretty simple. If I wanted to add some questions for extra credit, I guess I could say, which of the two stages produces ADP, right? Because once you've used up the ATP, you're left with ADP. Or which of the two stages produces NADP plus? I guess I could do that for extra credit. I might do that. But yeah, obviously, whenever you use ATP, you're left with ADP. And obviously, whenever you use NADPH, once you've lost those electrons, it then becomes NADP plus. So again, maybe extra credit. If I have time, I'll do that today and have those extra credit questions. But we'll see. Any questions? That's it then. We're done for the day. I'm not even going to start the next chapter. So again, We are done for exam 2. You now know everything you need to know for exam 2. So starting on Wednesday, we're starting on material for exam 3. You can take exam 2 anytime you want up until October 12th. So that's it. Have a good week. I'll see you on Wednesday. I would say I'd see you on office hours, but again, I'm not holding office hours tomorrow, and I apologize. I'll hold longer office hours on Wednesday to make up for it. And remember, if you came in late, don't forget to email me to let me know. And even though I didn't say it, as always, the last word for attendance is to actually ask me a question about the material presented in the lecture.